Why has Cuties struck a nerve? An award-winning film set in Paris's working-class suburbs about an 11-year-old torn between the pressure to conform with her family and the pressure from her peers to be sexy, seemed destined for an honorable run on the art house circuit. Then came outcry over Netflix's poster campaign in the US. And even though the streaming giant pulled the ad and apologized, a cancel Netflix campaign is still going strong, with Republican lawmakers taking aim at the movie itself. We're going to ask why. The film director says the whole point of the movie is to illustrate how children, we're talking about preteens after all, they're children, put enormous pressure on themselves to be hip and, yes, sexy. Meanwhile, there's a campaign on social media among older French teenage girls who demand the right to wear what they want to school, including miniskirts and crop tops. There too, is this about empowerment or submission? Does the digital age amplify the social pressures on teens? Or is this just the latest embodiment of the healthy rebellion of the next generation against the established norms? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the Cuties controversy. Joining us, Ines Sediki, founder of the banlieue-based community organization Get Up. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Franco-Canadian activist Rebecca Amsalem, the founder of the feminist newsletter Les Glorieuses, joins us from the French capital. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
From Durham in North Carolina, Lena Neal, Director of Corporate and Strategic Initiatives at the faith-based National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
And from Marseille, the southern French port city, Nassima Awarmoun, Professor of Marketing and Sociology of Consumption at the Kedge Business School. Welcome to the show. The France 24 debate.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Big delay there. We'll try to make the questions as short as possible with Marseille. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter. The hashtag F24debate. It's called Mignonne in French, Cuties in English, making headlines when it premiered on Netflix over in the United States. Auntie Francis explains.
Mais qu'est-ce que c'est que ça?
At first, the French coming-of-age film Cuties was celebrated, an award winner at Sundance earlier this year, described as a thoughtful examination of the hypersexualization of young girls. But since the movie started streaming on Netflix in the US, the backlash has been hard to understate. The hashtag Cancel Netflix trending online, and a Change.org petition to remove the film, with 600,000 signatures and counting.
Netflix promoting this show called Cuties.
A U.S. senator even called for the Justice Department to investigate whether Netflix was distributing child pornography.
88.
The movie centers on an 11-year-old French Senegalese girl who feels alienated from her family and makes friends with a group of neighborhood girls training for a dance competition. The film's director, Mamouna Doucouré, describes it as feminist, a thoughtful examination of what it means to be an adolescent girl in today's world. But the promotional images provided by Netflix showed otherwise, young girls in skimpy clothes and provocative poses, much different than the poster for the original French film. Netflix has since apologized for its misleading marketing, saying it's a social commentary against the sexualization of young children. The company and the director are encouraging people to watch the film before they criticize it.
Let me begin with you, Ines Sediki. Are you surprised by this cancel Netflix campaign over in the United States?
I'm mostly surprised by the cover Netflix picked for the movie in the US. I think Netflix completely failed the purpose of the movie by choosing this cover. I think the problem that is shown in the movie is a really important topic to talk about. The hypersexualization of young girls is a very problematic thing that we have to talk about within the family, within the families, within school, and in the public debate as well. And there's also, I'm really surprised because there's another documentary on Netflix about the Epstein case, which is a large case for prostitution and cases of
in some cases,
sex abuse towards minors. So there's a bit of a contradiction here, and I think it's really sad that we had to talk about this movie in this way and not talk about what's in it, really.
Do you agree, Lena Neal, that now that poster campaign is gone, we're missing the message of the movie?
So I have to commend the director for I saw Cuties is extremely powerful, and she is bringing to light the problem of hypersexualization of young girls, and particularly young women of color, young girls of color who are consistently hypersexualized and adultified. But I can't condone that in making this movie, this very powerful movie, and in making the point that young girls are facing many pressures and challenges and navigating, especially with unfettered access to social media. I can't condone that in the making of the movie itself that Maimouna Decoré was actually sexualizing the very young actresses in the movie, and by doing so could have really affected their health and well-being. And furthermore, it just adds to the desensitization that we are seeing in terms of sexualization of young girls, especially in a time during the pandemic that we know, Interpol just released its second report in 6 months. The FBI is seeing exponential increases in child pornography, also called child sex abuse material, predatory behavior. Here in the US, we're fighting long overdue individual and systemic racism. Again, the way that the movie was portrayed, certainly the posters were just adding to racial stereotypes. And in light of the Me Too movement, where even adult actresses had a hard time, felt like they didn't have consent.
But France 24 producer Imen Melaz went to a talk with the director, and she carefully explained how they accompanied these 11-year-old actors along each step of the way, making sure that they weren't exposed to any problems. Maimouna Decoré, who remade that point, this is her directing debut, Cuties, and she had this to say in an opinion piece she wrote in the Washington Post, where she said that we as adults have not given children the tools to grow up healthy in our society. To see these youngsters, she had gone to see a dance performance by by other preteens, put so much pressure on themselves so early, was heartbreaking. Again, what other way can you tell this story, Lena Neal?
You don't need to see abuse in order to understand it. And again, I have read and listened to Maimouna Decoré. I've reached out to her as well. I would love to talk to her because I think we are saying the same thing. But in order to make that point, you can't sexualize the girls. And I saw that they had, she had a therapist on set to help them with the celebrity. I haven't yet heard that they were talking about, what the effects of simulated masturbation on 12-year-old girls may do. So I do think that, she is clearly talented. And I believe that she could have found ways to still have a very strong message, share the points that she wanted to make. It might have been even more powerful for her to not choose minors, particularly because there is so much research showing, including from the American Psychologists Association, that just being exposed to certain song lyrics and pornographic or sexually explicit material can really harm the well-being. So again, from what I am hearing is that there weren't those the mechanisms in place.
Rebecca Amsalem, do you agree?
I think this polemic is actually insane. What we're talking about is a movie that is a masterpiece. I think that the filmmaker really pointed out perfectly about what preteens can actually feel, and we all know how it's difficult to pass on those emotions. As a teenager, you want to fit in. You want to be the same. You want to act the same way as your peers. You want to act the same way as society asks you to act, and at the same time, you want to be rebellious a little bit. And I think that those feelings were perfectly shown on this movie. And what I don't understand about this polemic, it's kind of how would I put it? hyper how do you say it? So kind of an hypocrisy, right? The filmmaker is showing a story, and I think it's a story that many girls and many preteens experience in their young age. And I think that, as you put it before, the actresses they were guided in a safe way when making the movie, and they were not being exposed to any abuse. And I think this movie is art, and we cannot tell the filmmaker to be more this or less that. And I think at some point the characters cannot be all either white or black. And to be quite frank about this polemic, I think that if the filmmaker was a white filmmaker, there wouldn't be a polemic here. And I think the backlash here is both sexist and racist. And I think that some conservatives in the US are actually trying to use this topic to pass on conservative views, especially in terms of when we think about the upcoming elections coming in a few months.
How so? How does that play into their narrative?
Well, I think it's quite easy to sum up the movie around this topic of hypersexualization of girls. It's not the only topic that the filmmaker is actually tackling in the movie. As I said, I think that the emotions that a preteen can feel is actually the main topic of the movie, and I think that hypersexualization is kind of one of the other topics that she's tackling. But I think that what they do is that they saw the poster, they didn't see the movie. Actually, Ted Cruz, who was one of the presidential candidates in 2016, asked to ban the movie from the platform, and he said himself that he didn't see the movie. So we can see that they just use the poster and they just use the story, the sum of the story to pass on the wrong idea that some people want to hypersexualize girls, and it's not what this movie is about. It's not what it's about.
All right, and that brings us back, Nassima Ouramoun, to the comment that was made at the outset of this program by Ines Siddiqui, and that is that stark contrast, again, between the poster by Netflix for the American debut of the film and the poster campaign here in France. How do you explain it?
Yeah, so to my point of view, there is a sort of a cooptation by the marketplace of social phenomena that are very important. We can see that, of course, through Me Too or through Black Lives Matter movement. And there's, on the other side, a consumer activism that is going up, which is a good thing because consumers through social media tend to express themselves per the values and causes they want to see brands or the marketplace co-opt. But this has certain limits in a sense, because what we see is Netflix actually creating a sort of a dissonance between the content of the movie and the representation that is hypersexualized. It's pretty counterproductive, but they benefit from a sort of a controversy that now is escaping a little bit their hands. So if that was a cynical kind of a strategy from Netflix, then it's wrong. And we have seen earlier strategies from L'Oréal, for example, which was boycotted as well for reasons of co-opting Black Lives Matter in a very cosmetic way, not a deep way. Now, in my opinion, the danger here is, of course, to see the conservative way. You can cancel this movie, but you cannot cancel reality. The gender-based violence is here. The hypersexualization of girls is here and pretty dangerous for their health and for society at large. And this controversy actually is very counterproductive because it escapes the real problem of violence. To speak of visual representation in a visual economy, which it misses the point in a sense. And it's better to speak about the content than just about the visual, in a sense.
And we will be speaking about the content in part two. And Ines Sediki, just to prime the pump on that, this pressure to be sexy, did you feel it at a young age?
I actually did from a very young age. And I was 15 years ago, so it's a long time ago. And I think it's
longer for me.
It's getting worse and worse because of all social media, because of video clips, like music video clips becoming more and more explicit, and the lack of education to balance that at school and at home. And I think it's really important to trigger these conversations at home as well. And I think going to see this movie with the mother or with the father for a young girl is a really important thing to do.
All right, we're going to come back and talk about it. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at the controversy surrounding Cuties, or the conversations it sparked. The debut film of Franco-Senegalese film director Maimouna Doucouré. She says she hopes there can be a dispassionate conversation that doesn't lead to what they're calling a cancel culture, but a real debate about what preteens go through in today's world. We're talking about it with Ines Sediki, founder of the banlieue-based community or activist organization Get Up. Franco-Canadian activist Rebecca Anselm is the founder of the feminist newsletter Les Glorieuses. From Durham, North Carolina, we're pleased to welcome back Lena Neal of the faith-based National Center on Sexual Exploitation. And from the French port city of Marseille, Nassima Rouamoun, professor of marketing and sociology at the Kedge Business School. We're talking about this pressure to be sexy, Nassima. When Barbie dolls first hit toy stores in 1959, the target audience went to age 12 when shares in market maker Mattel plummeted 5 years ago. There was a report that Barbies were now aimed at girls aged 3 to 6. And that kind of brings us back to what we were talking about, Nassima Rouamoun, and that is this pressure to be sexualized even before you're a teenager. What's it all about? Is it just about making money?
Actually, yeah, there is a strong connection between the hypersexualization of kids and women and the gender discourse that associate girls and women with being sex objects that starts very early in the marketplace through media and advertising discourse. This is something that is on a continuous basis called out by feminist organizations and by consumer activists as well, more and more. But it is still something that is very strong. It recalls also a debate we had like 20 years ago about this phenomenon of the Lolita, which was a trend in the fashion industry, especially in the luxury industry, that was made sort of normalized. And then we had some actions, including in France from public policy, banning certain lingerie pieces from the schools, for example, a certain type of fashion that tends to actually make girls become adults very quickly, but not only adults, but sexualized adults, because sex sells, because we live in a libidinous sort of hyper consumer society. But we see with the Me Too movement, for the adults at least, a whole backlash again, for example, Victoria's Secret kind of a narrative. And we see emerging lingerie brands, for example, that speak about well-being, body positive, and not the typical sexualization through the body that very early girls are channeled into, which is a problem for gender equality for sure.
In that op-ed, and I'll put it to you, Rebecca Amsalem, In that opinion piece that the film's director wrote for the Washington Post, she said, "All my life I've juggled two cultures, French and Senegalese. As a result, people often ask me about the oppression of women in more traditional societies. And I always ask, but isn't the objectification of women's bodies in Western Europe and the United States another kind of oppression? When girls feel so judged at such a young age, how much freedom will they ever have in their life?"
Absolutely. And I think it's part of a bigger problem, as you put it. It's we raise girls to be sexualized at a really young age, and then we tell them not to be that sexualized because it kind of aroused the adults, and this is what's problematic. And what I denounce with all the debate around the movie and what I admire with the movement of the Monday, September the 14th, is that I think that teenagers are aware of this. They are aware that the adults are demanding way too much from them and way more from them than from the boys. And it's part of what I call the rape culture, which means that in the eyes of the adults, they're going to see the ties of a young teenager as sexualized. And I think what is the problem is actually why the adults are seeing it as sexualized and not why teenagers come to schools with shorts or a cleavage, for instance. And I think that we should be aware not to blame the girls for the reactions of what they're doing, but we have to blame the people who are actually seeing them as sexualized and the market, as you put it, because indeed we live in a patriarchal capitalist society that sexualized women, girls from a really young age, and all of this has to change, and we have to tackle each of those topics one at a time. But what we can do right now is tell the girls that it's not their fault, and they don't need to change. What needs to be changed is the society around them.
Yeah, it can seem counterintuitive, a feminist act being to dress more provocatively. You mentioned that hashtag that Monday, September 14th, this past Monday, girls across France staged skirts against sexism protests in high schools across the country. In a nation where there's no national uniform like they have over in the UK, principals do have the right to demand proper attire. In one high school in the southwestern city of Dax, for instance, they also launched an online petition in favor of crop tops. Now, the story has divided the government, it seems. On one side, you have the education minister insisting the final words go to principals. It would be time for people in this country to take balanced positions between those who don't want to see us to see their faces, I guess that's a reference to the veil, and those who want all sorts of outfits. I think there should be a greater common sense. However, the junior minister for citizens' rights sees otherwise. She tweeted, "Today, Monday, September 14th, young girls everywhere in France have spontaneously decided to wear skirts, crop tops, or makeup to state their freedom in the face of judgment and sexist acts. As a mother, I support them with sisterhood and admiration." So, Lena Neal, whose side are you on, the education minister or the citizens' rights minister?
Listen, I have to side with my fellow panelists. And the question that comes to my mind as a mother of 3 young girls and a feminist is looking at the broader cultural implications, and that we do live in a misogynistic culture and a consumer culture, and that we have grown up, and when I was growing up, and I think it's just been exacerbated now, in a culture that says a girl's value is her sexuality, that sexiness is empowerment, that hypersexualization is empowerment, that hypersexualization is femininity. And that quote by Maimouna Decouré I found to be one of the most powerful. I read too, that hypersexualization is oppression. So, as I would be speaking with my daughters, I would say, are you doing this because it's something that you really feel is empowering and shows who you truly are? Or are you trying to conform to a culture that is telling you that your greatest worth is you as a sexual object, and whether the culture is objectifying you or you are sexually objectifying yourself, we know that is detrimental to girls' health and well-being. So again, I think us on the panel are saying many things, and I'll Ms. Siddiqui had said as well that we need to have these conversations. We need to have conversations with our girls, talk about media literacy, talk about the effects and the realities of living in a misogynistic culture that puts the value of girls on their bodies and not on their minds and character.
So do you support the French high school girls who decided Monday to wear crop tops and miniskirts and makeup to school?
Again, I don't necessarily condone it. I don't condemn it. I would hope that those actions were in the context of conversation with the girls, with each other, and with others in their life that, again, can point out and question why they chose that specific action as a sign of empowerment.
Ines Siddiqui, it's a recurring question. Should there be a school uniform in France?
Yeah, well, I think it's more about educating young girls to develop a sort of critical thinking about what society expects from them, but also education towards young boys and even older men about how to receive this kind of outfit and how it doesn't necessarily mean that they want to engage in something with them. And I think it's definitely less something to be debated on the national level and everyone coming up with their
okay, well, let me ask you this question.
But
There's always been a pressure to conform among peers, throughout history, right? Would you say that there is more or less pressure than, say, 10 or 20 years ago on girls to dress a certain way in school, or is it the same?
Oh, it's definitely more than earlier.
Why?
Because of all the shows you have on Netflix, for example, where you see young adults of 20, 23 years old, sometimes playing young teenagers, having sexual conversations and scenes as well. And you have also the spread of social media, everything being so accessible, so affordable for everyone to watch, and a big lack of education on the other hand to balance that. I think that's really the problem.
In part one of our discussion, Rebecca and Salem, we talked about, and it was the point made by Nassima Oramoun, how perhaps we're at a turning point now with the Me Too movement. But then when you hear Ines saying how there's more pressure than before on high school girls to dress a certain way, do you agree?
I think, yeah, I do agree. And I also think that this movement, the movement of Monday, September the 14th, is a really beautiful movement because it's a movement in which girls gather from all around the country to say that they want to dress as they want to dress. They're not saying that they want to dress sexy. They're just saying we are fed up that we have those rules that the boys do not have. And what is interesting about this is that, as you said, the directors of school now have the right to say and to create the rules that they want. And one of them published a letter saying that girls were not allowed to wear shorts. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but in Paris right now, in France, it's like about 30 degrees. So it's kind of hot weather. They're saying that they cannot wear shorts because boys have good eyes, and good eyes is the expression that this person said. And what is interesting about this is that every time, I think it's been decades and centuries that they tell girls how to dress and they tell women how to dress because, it disturbed the boys. And it's actually against this that the girls were marching and having this demonstration on Monday. And it's a really pacific demonstration. And what they do is they just want to say that they're fed up with rape culture. They want to make boys responsible for their reprehensible behavior. And they want to stop being the reason that the boys do not have a good behavior. And I think this is what's interesting here. And as you mentioned, it's not black or white. It's not, we have to fight both against the hypersexualization of girls and women. And at the same time, we have to fight for our teenagers to dress as they want and not to be seen as sexual objects by the adults, because I think this is what the problem here.
Let's turn to the professor on this panel, Nassima Oramoun. You teach at a business school where I'm sure the mantra there, like everywhere else, is dress for success. You want to present a certain way when you go for a job interview or when you want to make a convincing point. Your thoughts on how people should people be taught that lesson at a young age? Should there be specific rules on how you dress, boys and girls, when they're in school, when they're in high school?
I actually teach mainly luxury and fashion, to be honest with you. So I see many young students interested in this topic of how they should dress or find their personality or construct their identity through clothing. Now, I don't think the problem is how girls or women are dressed. Again, like the fellow panel said just before, it's about the rape culture. It's about violence. It's about power issues. Who has the power to oblige or have a gaze that is negative on girls who actually try on a certain personalities? You know, when you're an adolescent, you kind of are constructing your identity as a woman and probably a bit rebellious, but it doesn't mean that you feel yourself as provocative in a sexual way. It is the society that has to be educated on the meanings of clothes for very young kids are not the ones they should apply when they think of adults. And this is so I just wanted to point out the issue of power, of patriarchy, and of the normalization of violence against the girls. So now, of course, the students are very insecure as per how they should show themselves in public, especially to enter the professional arena. And I see different, just like in society, you have different styles. There are some women who are feminist, and I believe that there is a sort of consumer, a sort of empowerment, feminist empowerment through the body. We know this since third wave feminism, since the Spice Girls phenomenon in a sense. So sexualizing yourself doesn't mean you're powerless. It can lead to power. But we see also the counter movement as well in the classroom when we see women who are actually into different movements and would like to be valued for who they are. They were to be comfortable working and not to please the male gaze to advance their career. So we see both in a sense.
And on that score, what's your experience? Are things improving?
I think definitely things are improving. I see very assertive women who actually are absolutely at ease, no matter how they show themselves in public as per fashion or and whether they are actually very visibly coded as sexy or more conservative in the way they dress. The most important is we see a lot of students actually very concerned about gender equality. I think that my experience now from 15 years ago, it comes in the discussion in the classroom for just like sustainability, for example. These are sort of causes and values that the students are championing more than before. So they are aware of all these conversations. There are pressure to conform to a certain norm of beauty as capital, both for men and women now. But at the same time, there are struggles and people finding way to present themselves and construct their identity in a sense.
All right, final word on this.
Complex.
Ines Sediki, final word on this, because
Yes.
you earlier you were saying how there's this pressure on girls to dress a certain way, which has grown. You're saying, and now you just heard your reaction to the fact that no, at the graduate level, at least at the Kedge Business School, we're seeing women are taking matters into their own hands. Are you reassured?
A little bit, but I just want to point something out really, really quickly. It's an inconsistency we have in talking about how women should be able to dress as they want, because we kind of push them to dress wear skirts and to wear whatever they want. But when they decide to wear a veil, for example, or a religious outfit, they're banned from school or they're banned from work. They're not allowed to do sports and anything. So I would just and maybe tell Mrs. Shepherd to be a little bit more consistent when she says that we should support
Citizens' rights
any
minister.
woman, any young girl to dress as she wants, and just apply that to everyone, because representation matters, and everyone should be able to make their own choices based on their own critical thinking.
All right, and that's certainly a conversation we're going to have again about about that issue. Ines Sediki, I want to thank you. I want to thank Rebecca Anselem. I want to thank Lena Neal for joining us from North Carolina. Nassima Ouramoun from Marseille. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. Catalina Marchant joins us. Yeah, that hashtag canceled Netflix is still going strong over in the United States. Over here, people are saying, why isn't the movie yet on Netflix? It's still in cinemas here, that's why.
Yes, we will discuss that a bit more. There's also this opinion piece that the Washington Post published. It was written by the author of the film, the director, Maimouna Doucouré. She explains the origins of the film and how it was conceived. She said that she was at a community event in Paris a few years ago when a group of girls came to the stage dressed and dancing in a very risque way. They were only 11 and their performance was shocking. So she explains that she was curious to understand what was actually happening. So she spent the next year interviewing, she says, hundreds of girls from the age of 10 to 11, and she found remarkable similarities between the answers of the girls, saying that they saw that the sexier a woman is on Instagram or TikTok, the more likes she gets, and that they tried to imitate that sexuality in a belief that they would become more popular on social media. Twitter users obviously respond to this. There's a counter hashtag to cancel Netflix, which is why not cancel TikTok? Other users saying that I think this brings awareness to what's actually happening in society with kids. What those kids are doing in that movie is what happens in real life in TikTok and Instagram. So why not cancel TikTok or cancel Instagram? People should be rallying on banning TikTok. More than Cuties, there are far more sexualized children and teenagers on there. While we're at it, here's the TikTok page. Maybe viewers can judge for themselves if this is true or not.
This is something that we didn't broach but could have, which is the cancel culture, right? The answer to things is to boycott and cancel. Ines Sediki, your thoughts on those two hashtags? Cancel Netflix, cancel TikTok?
Yeah, I'm definitely against canceling stuff and that culture that prevents people from having deep conversations and putting stuff on the table and really going to the bottom of these problematics. And also Netflix is on the other side a really progressive platform where there are a lot of shows that talk about or show different people, LGBTQI community, people coming from different backgrounds who don't feel represented in the movies or in the cinema. So I think it's also good to say that it's also a space and fiction is also a space to go and tell different stories to educate people on these topics as well.
Yes, well, the author does say that this is why she created the movie. She did want to generate this debate on the sexualization of children based on what she saw, but she does hope that the debate does not get too caught up in what she mentions as well as cancel culture.
All right, many thanks, Catalina Marchant. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.